What's up, guys? Michael Key, investment advisor with EKC Financial Solutions, and today I got a crazy one for you. So, I was going to talk about taxes, and I'm still going to do that, but when I was kind of gathering the information on the stuff I wanted to talk about, I started looking up on Social Security. And this is going to be geared towards millennials more so than someone who is retiring right now. And, so I'm a millennial, I'm 28, and I was curious. And I actually ended up running an analysis because I've always wondered, right now, your contribution, if you are a W-2 employee, which means you work for someone basically and they pay you a salary, you pay 6.2% of your wages into Social Security. If you're self-employed, you're a contractor, I know it's 15.3% total with Social Security and Medicare. I don't know, so it's like 12.4% that you're paying in the Social Security portion. So I'm not counting the Medicare side. We're going to leave that the same. I'm just talking about Social Security. And the assumption I ran was if you were 23 years old, which is how old I was when I started working in the industry I'm working in, is 2016. So I was 23 years old. And this wasn't my starting wage, but this is just an assumption. But basically, assuming you come out of college making $60,000 a year. And yes, I know that's high. Just go with me. So $60,000 a year starting salary at 23 years old, paying 6.2% into Social Security. And what I wanted to see is if we took that 6.2% and we didn't force your employer to pay into it, but you just took your 6.2% you're contributing right now and contributed it to an investment account, like a 401k or IRA, whatever it may be. But we invest it, and that money's yours. And you can't touch it till age 65. And the conclusion I came up to now, some other variables. I said that you would have an annual wage increase of 3% every year, and inflation was 3% every year. Now, Social Security, when they run their numbers, has an annual wage increase of about 3.8%. And they say that's the national average. I don't think that's true. In fact, I think my 3% number is high. But I illustrated a lower annual wage increase than what Social Security did. So, to start off with Social Security's numbers, by the time I would have retired, and I started taking Social Security, I think age 63 or whatever the 100% Social Security age was. It's like 60, let's say 65. I would get a $6,047 a month benefit, which is $72,564 a year in Social Security. Now that is in 7 years from now. So that number is adjusted for inflation. In today's dollars, it was around $2,000 and some dollars. But $6,047 a month is what I would get as a Social Security benefit. Now that doesn't change. Now that's a flat rate once I start receiving that money. If I lived to age 100, I would have received $2.5 million total in Social Security benefits. $2.5 million. Now, if we got rid of Social Security and we took that 6.2% and we invested it into the S&P 500, and I went back and I looked at the last 100-year historical annual return for the S&P 500 with dividend reinvestment is 10.8% annually. So that 6.2% of my salary with a 3% annual wage increase, which means I get paid 3% more in my salary every year. So you'd be contributing 3% more than you did the year before as far as what you're saving. Your account would be over $3.3 million at age 65. And the next assumption I said was, well, okay, once you're 65 and you start taking money, we're going to want to replace at least 50% of what our salary was the year prior to retiring, which is around about $200,000. So if I started my first year in retirement taking $102,000 was the benefit amount I would take out of my investment account. It was $102,000. And I would take every year after that 3% more than that number to adjust for inflation. So that means instead of getting that $72,000 Social Security benefit that never increases, I would take more and more out in a distribution every year out of the account. I would also continue to earn 4% returns on my account, so a pretty conservative return amount. So I'm not invested aggressively. I'm very aggressive. I'm invested very conservatively. When I retire, earning 4% a year. With those variables, the first year I would already have $30,000 more in a benefit that I could take out. And doing that until age 100, I would have taken out $6.2 million in income. So almost $4 million more I would have received in income by contributing the same amount over my life. Actually, contributing less over my lifetime or my working years, because Social Security has you earning higher annual wage increases. So you would contribute a little bit less and get 3 times more roughly, or 2.5 times more. Here's the other kicker though. When you die with the Social Security benefit, your kids don't get that money. It just goes to Social Security. It goes back to the government. Now, your spouse can receive half of it. There's certain things with that. I'm just talking about passing it down to your kids. When you die, your kids don't get anything. With my way, after you receive $6.2 million in income in retirement, once you die, at age 100, you would still have $1.5 million to pass down to your kids. So how about we get freaking rid of Social Security? I mean, when you hear, people arguing like, oh, they want to cut our Social Security benefits, and people, the only people that should be arguing about that are people older that are actually looking at retiring soon, because they've already paid in everything and they risk getting nothing, right? But someone who's younger, like myself, let's get rid of that thing all day long. Because I would much rather invest the 6.2%, or for someone like me who's contracted, I'm paying the full 12.4%. I would much rather on it any day. And here's the thing: is that's only with your half. Like, if we made your current employer still contribute that 6.2% on their end, we don't change anything, right? We're just putting it into an investment account that he can still get the tax deduction for it. That number would look double what yours would. So that's the other thing too, is that your employer's contributing to this for you too. So it's actually you're getting double the contribution into Social Security to get that measly $72,000 a year in 37 years. So in mine, it only illustrates a 6.2% contribution. Hell, you could receive the 3 the 3.1% in your salary, and then you contribute the other 3.1% into this account, and your employer gives you 3.1% into this too. So we could actually put more money in your pocket to take home and spend and still get these kind of numbers. And I mean, what are we doing? Social Security is the biggest scam in the history of the United States for everyone. And this affects everyone the same. It doesn't matter what race you are, what religion you are, nothing. If you're an American citizen and you're working, this affects you. Okay, it's like this. So again, the only people that should have an opposition to something like this is someone who has already paid for the last 20, 30 years into Social Security, and they're looking to retire in the next 10, 15 years. Like those are the people that should be, not wanting anything to happen to Social Security, and rightfully so, because they've paid all that money in, and they want to receive something, and they should. But there may need to be some kind of phase out of this, because not just would it be more beneficial, think about the wealth transfer. And yeah, maybe in 80-something years when I'm $101.5 million, definitely won't be $1.5 million today, but it's still something to pass down to my kids, where right now they don't get anything. So you need to understand, when you're working, you're paying this Social Security money, and it's not even paying you. It's paying other people that are on Social Security now, whatever, but it's also paying for I don't mean, excuse my language, but it's also paying for a bunch of other weird things like we don't even know. It's being wasted. It's the government. They waste. And I don't mean to get political on this. I know this is like more of a professional show, but when I ran this analysis, this was frustrating. And millennials, if you run this analysis, and yeah, maybe there's some slight differences in the numbers, but it ain't that much of a difference. Like, I have the math all here, and there's no trade-off. Social Security does not even compare. If we even did half of the effort into the investment account, just getting the average returns for the last 100 years, I could even dumb that down a little bit, that percentage, and invest more conservatively, and I'd still beat it. That's just ridiculous. It's a waste of money, and the government wants to raise taxes on everyone and take more, but they're already getting a whole bunch of money. Where's the net? So there's going to be a projected $4 million per person if they've earned $60,000 a year, roughly. When that person reaches their retirement age, they have 30 years of retirement, there's a $4 million gap that the government receive per person, basically. So, I mean, it's dumbfounding. And again, I'm young. And if you are older, then you have the right to oppose this, because you have already paid that money in. You've already wasted the money, unfortunately. And so there's not much of a trade-off that can be done, because you just don't have the time horizon to do it. But there should be like a phase out, like maybe they cut mine in half what I have to pay, and then the next generation doesn't pay anything. I don't know, because I'd rather take a third or a fourth of that 6.2% and start investing it now. And the difference, what they need to do is just force you to invest it. Like that would. And then think about the influx of money into the equity markets, into the stock market, by doing that, because this is going to an investment account. Like it could be whatever. It doesn't have to be a 401k. And I didn't even take into consideration you even having a 401k on top of all that, right? This was just reallocating the Social Security money. And if you hear any noise in the background, it's rain. I apologize. I'm still got the Average Joe studio set up. But I think, they keep wanting to talk about, we got to increase capital gains taxes. We got to increase taxes on the rich. if you want to put money into people's pockets, change this. Stop wasting it. And it's just ridiculous to me. If you think anyone, any politician, like Republican, Democrat, Independent, it doesn't matter. If you think any of them are efficient workers, then you're a freaking lying to yourself. And again, I do not want to get political on this, but now I'm on a rant. Okay, like we have people like AOC that's on the financial board of whatever. Like she works on the finance committee for Congress, and she's never worked a day in finance in her freaking life. She doesn't understand, and I don't even know if she can. She has a degree in hell. I have a degree in economics. I have probably a better degree than she does. Yeah, I didn't go to the wherever she went, University of Boston or wherever. You know, I went to MTSU, but it's the same damn education. It's the same degree. But I actually do it for a living. She works in Congress. Like I wouldn't even say that I have near the experience that should be needed to work on any financial committee that has to do with changing financial legislation in the government or overseeing anything like that. When I was watching the whole GameStop hearing on the questions that they were asking about trading, it was the stupidest freaking questions ever. I'm just like, how stupid are these politicians on both sides asking questions about something? They literally have no idea what's going on, and they didn't even care. And so, you know, there's better ways to go about this and invest the money. And before even raising taxes, because here's the other number that I've run an analysis on. You can't just raise taxes on the rich. It doesn't work. I went back to the 1930s and looked at all the historical tax brackets. And I looked at all the historical tax revenue throughout the years. So, and I ran a correlation analysis. And correlation, you have three numbers. You have for a correlation coefficient, basically, that you have a -1, which means they are negatively correlated, which means if I go this way, you go this way, evenly. You do the opposite. You have a 0, which is there's no correlation at all. You know, like they don't move at all alike. Then you have a +1, which means that we do this, we move the same. We're correlated. When you look at the amount of tax revenue compared to when the upper tax brackets were increased, there was a negative correlation, and not just a negative correlation. I believe the correlation coefficient was like -0.5 to -0.75-ish around there. So a very strong negative correlation, which means that they got less tax revenue when they raised the upper tax brackets. And I read this in an article, and then I went back and did my own analysis to confirm it. There was, however, a positive correlation when you increased the lower tax brackets. And why is that? Well, that's because when you increase the upper tax brackets, you're not capturing as many people, because not as many people make that kind of money. The other thing is, too, is that they're able to take advantage of more tax breaks and more tax advantaged opportunities. Maybe they can put more into tax deferred accounts. Maybe they can do whatever that allows them to take advantage and lower that amount of income to be in a lower tax bracket. But when you increase the bottom tax bracket, you capture everyone. Let's say you increase the lowest tax bracket, you pretty much capture everyone that's working. But when you do that, you have to tax the rich and the poor alike, because you're taxing everyone more. That's the only time they got more tax revenue, because they had to capture the whole working population inside of it. And the people at the lower end of the tax bracket, they can't take as much advantage of those tax benefits that the rich can. But, you know, you always hear like, oh, you know, some people get a better start, you know, their parents can pass money down or whatever. Well, if they switch this up, you even the playing field, not fully, but a whole hell of a lot. I mean, $4 million difference in retirement money with those numbers. And I still have $1.5 million passed down to my kids. And here's the thing. They would tax this more. There's more money at that point to be taxed. You wouldn't even have to raise taxes on that money. You could tax it now, even the same as like it would be now or less. But they would get more tax revenue because there's more money to be taxed. So again, when it comes to running these numbers, I'm not an actuary, and I couldn't just go and start doing all the doing the tax revenue stuff. But I bet you they would come out with my little solution here, they would get more tax revenue. By the time that people my age, if they phased it out and by the time we're in retirement, that's when they would see the returns. But the problem is that they're looking short term. They're not looking long term. But they need to look long term on some of this stuff. Because when they first implemented Social Security, they were looking long term. But they had a stupid outlook because it's failing now. But the economic growth from the influx into the equity markets with the retirement money, I think would be great, because now you're investing in these companies and you're promoting growth, and everyone would have a part of it. So, I still kind of want to go more into the tax thing, but I got kind of fired up when I saw that number, when I started running those numbers. And if I'm wrong, please someone, send me an email, show me some math, and I'm open to it, because I'm fired up about that, and I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. But that's just crazy that the opportunity costs you're giving up is, when you're someone who's my age or younger, I'm 28, is just crazy. And to kind of build on that, they're about to do this infrastructure deal, and I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but what I am saying is where they're going to get the money from. They're talking about, increasing capital gains taxes or other forms of taxes. Well, we got the money right there. Where's that money? But increasing capital gains taxes is another one that I don't quite agree with. Because when you increase taxes, we know when you increase taxes on a business, you are raising the expenses of that business. So for those of you that don't know who Arthur Laffer is, Arthur Laffer was Ronald Reagan's economic advisor, and he lives here in Nashville. And I had the pleasure of going to a lunch with him when he was talking about the local economy. And this is before Trump was elected, so I think it was during the election. So what, November-ish of 2016, October 2016-ish. And he was talking about the local economy, but he came up with what's called the Laffer curve, or Reaganomics, or trickle-down economics. That's Arthur Laffer. And what it is it's a economic model, and it shows on one end of the spectrum, if you had 0% tax rates, then you would have zero tax revenue. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you taxed everyone at 100% and took everyone's money that they earned, you would have zero tax revenue. Well, that doesn't make sense, Michael. Well, it does, because if you weren't earning a dime when you went to work, they were just taking all of it, you wouldn't work. There's no motivation, there's no incentive. So he's basically saying no one would work. Therefore, no one would be earning an income that the government could tax. Or they would just be doing illegal stuff and not paying taxes on it anyway. So what it does show is there's an equilibrium in taxing people and tax revenue. And I wish I could draw it, but basically, think of it as like a rainbow shape, an upside parabola, right? And in the middle here, where it comes to point, is the most efficient form of taxation. It's where you're going to get the most tax revenue and at the highest tax rates. Once you increase taxes by that rate, you start losing, or once you increase taxes beyond that equilibrium rate, you start losing tax revenue. Once you lower taxes beyond that equilibrium rate, you start losing tax revenue, right? It starts going down. So it needs to be somewhere in between there. Now, what I'm going to say is that we also know when you increase taxes on a business, going back to what I was saying before, when you increase taxes on a business, they pass that cost down to the consumer because the business needs to keep their margins. Revenue does not drive growth. Profits drive growth. Because if you're bringing in $100, but you're spending $150, you're not making money. In fact, you owe money. You're still broke. You're broker than broke. But if you're bringing in $100 and you're making $50 profit because you only have $50 in expenses, now you can take that money and either reinvest it in the business or, do whatever. That's how you grow. That's how these businesses grow. When you increase taxes, well, now it's taking that $50 expense and making it into a $75 expense. So now they have less margins. They're either going to pay it or they're going to front the consumer's got to front that cost. So they got to make their product more expensive. So it makes it more expensive for the consumer because you have to pay more for the product, but you also have to pay more in a sales tax. So the government double dips on you. But just think it would make everything more expensive. We already have inflation we have to worry about right now. But the same concept that I think would happen for capital gains in the market. So a lot of people are invested in mutual funds. If you have a 401k or an IRA, you're invested in mutual funds more than likely. And those mutual funds currently pass capital gains down to you. They're passed through to the investor. So if the fund companies have to pay more in taxes now, let's say, either you're going to be taxed more on the capital gains that are passed through to you, which you will be, but they'll also possibly raise the expense ratios of the fund because they have to make up the extra cost that they have. And that would then eat into your returns because that expense ratio is subtracted off your gross returns for that fund. So if you have a fund that did 10% gross returns for a year, but they have a 1% expense ratio, then you as the investor saw a 9% growth that year. And if they increase it and they're still earning the 10%, let's say they increase it by 0.5%, so from 1 to 1.5%, then that 10% gross growth, or gross return, would now look like 8.5% to the investor. But not to mention, any possible hit the equity markets may take when they initially increase taxes anyways. So these are just some things to think about, but and I apologize for getting any kind of political, but for me that was just eye-opening when I saw the numbers on the Social Security deal. And I'm not a politician, I'm not even that smart of a person. But maybe if what's funny is let's say someone went in and walked into Congress and proposed a bill doing this, they would laugh him off the freaking floor. And they would criticize, they would crucify him. They may kill him for proposing something like that. And voters would also criticize him for doing that kind of proposition, because they don't understand what the actual numbers are. I think. Like, how many times have you guys sat down and actually looked at that? Some of you may have, some of you, I assume most of you haven't, because I mean, you have to go on the Social Security website, and I don't know how many younger people my age are going on there to see what kind of benefit they're going to get in 30-some years, right? So just think about that. Like, when you get paid, look at your pay stub. Look at how much you've been paying in Social Security on your end. Look how much your employer then pays as well. So, I mean, I'm all for putting money in people's pockets. I always think, my job as a financial advisor is to make your financial plan a lot more efficient. And whatever your goal is, try and help you efficiently meet that goal. And I think that'd be pretty damn efficient. So, if you have any questions, or you go and you do the math and you see something I don't, and maybe I'm wrong, hopefully I am, because that's kind of aggravating, send it to me in the email. I'll look at it, and if you have any questions, ask me. But if you like the video, hit like, and don't forget to subscribe. And next time, I don't know what I'm going to talk about yet. I'm always thinking of new topics, and sometimes ones like these come at random. But yeah, hit like, hit subscribe, and thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Michael Key, investment advisor with EKC Financial Solutions. Our goal on this channel is to bring you valuable content as it relates to finance and investing. As a disclosure, any information discussed on this channel is not a recommendation and should be viewed for educational purposes only. Thank you.